On a Thursday afternoon in March 2024, an 84-year-old woman named Eleanor picked up her phone and heard something that made her heart stop. The voice on the other end belonged to someone she loved more than anything in this world, or at least that's what she believed. And what happened over the next 3 days would nearly cost Eleanor everything she had saved over a lifetime. But this story doesn't end the way most of these stories end, because sometimes the people we love call at exactly the right moment. But first, if you're new here and if you like learning about scams through real stories so you can protect yourself and the people that you love, this is the place for you. So hit subscribe and turn on notifications. And now, let's get back into the story. Eleanor had lived in the same house in Framingham, Massachusetts for 47 years. She raised three children there, buried her husband there, and now at 84 years old, she spent most of her days tending to her garden and waiting for phone calls from her grandchildren. Eleanor was also nobody's fool. She had worked as a bookkeeper for over 30 years before retiring, and she still balanced her checkbook by hand every single month. She knew exactly how much money she had, which was $127,000 in savings, the result of decades of careful planning. Her oldest grandson, Michael, was 26 and lived in Connecticut. He worked as an MMA instructor at a gym in Hartford, teaching self defense classes to everyone from teenagers to senior citizens. And he called Eleanor every Sunday without fail. She loved those calls more than anything. Michael would tell her about his students, his girlfriend, his plans for the future, and Eleanor was so proud of him. He was such a good guy, he was strong, but he was also very gentle. So when Eleanor's phone rang on that Thursday afternoon and she heard a young man's voice say, "Grandma, Grandma, it's me," her heart immediately thought of Michael. "Michael, is that you?" The voice on the other end sounded strange, muffled, like he was crying. "Grandma, I'm in trouble. I got in a car accident. I hit someone and they're saying it's my fault. I'm at the police station." Eleanor felt her chest tighten. "Are you okay, Michael? Oh my God, are you hurt?" "I'm okay, but Grandma, they're gonna charge me. The lawyer says I need bail money or I'm going to jail. Please, you can't tell Mom and Dad. They're gonna be so disappointed in me. Can you please help, please?" Eleanor's hands were now shaking. Her grandson was in trouble and he needed her. And he was asking her not to tell his parents because he was actually ashamed. And that detail felt so real. It's exactly what Michael would say. So she replied, "Well, how much do you need, sweetheart?" And before Eleanor could say anything else, another voice came on the line. This time it was older, calmer, more authoritative. "Miss Bancroft, this is David Hollister. I'm a public defender and I've been assigned to represent your grandson. And I need to explain this situation to you and I need you to listen extremely carefully." Eleanor's mind started racing. A lawyer. This was real. This was actually happening. So the man who called himself David Hollister explained that Michael had been in a serious car accident. He'd struck a pedestrian, and the victim was in the hospital, and the family has decided to press charges. Michael needed $8,500 for bail, and it had to be paid in cash within the next 3 hours, or he could be transferred to county lockup. Then the lawyer said something that would keep Eleanor silent for the next 3 days. "Miss Bancroft, I have to inform you that the judge has issued a gag order on this case. And this means that you are legally prohibited from discussing any details of Michael's arrest with anyone. You cannot tell your daughter, your friends, no one. And if you violate the gag order, you could be held in contempt of court and it could seriously damage Michael's case. The prosecutor could argue that you are trying to interfere. Does this make sense? Do you understand?" Eleanor felt a chill run through her. She didn't fully understand, but she understood enough. If she talked, she could make things worse for Michael. If she called her daughter, she could hurt his case. The lawyer was telling her that staying silent wasn't just what Michael wanted, it was what the law required. "I understand," she said. "Good. Now, because this involves a minor injury case, the court will not accept personal checks or credit cards for bail. So you're going to need to withdraw cash. A bonded courier from our office will come to your home to collect it. Do not, under any circumstances, tell the bank what this money is for. Gag orders extend to financial institutions. So if the bank reports this, it could trigger an investigation that actually will hurt your grandson." So Eleanor decided to go to her bank and withdraw the $8,500. When the teller asked if everything was okay, Eleanor remembered what the lawyer said. She smiled and said she was buying some furniture for her granddaughter's new apartment. The teller nodded and started to count out the bills. That afternoon, a young man in a dress shirt showed up at her house. He was polite, he was professional, he had paperwork that looked official, and he gave Eleanor a receipt with a case number and told her that Michael would be released by the evening. But Michael never called that night, and Eleanor couldn't call him because of the gag order. But Friday morning, the lawyer called again. Miss Bancroft, I have some difficult news. The pedestrian's condition has worsened, and the family is now pursuing additional charges. The judge has increased bail to $20,000, so we're going to need another $12,000 today, or Michael is going to be transferred to state custody. Eleanor felt sick, but what could she do? She couldn't call anyone, she couldn't ask for help. The lawyer had told her the legal consequences of breaking the gag order. She was completely alone in this, and her grandson was counting on her. So she went back to the bank and withdrew another $12,000. And the same courier came again, took the money, and left another receipt. Saturday morning, another call. The victim had died. Michael was now facing vehicular manslaughter. Another $15,000 was needed for the upgraded charges. The courier would come Sunday afternoon to collect it. That night, Eleanor barely slept. She had already given $20,500, and she was about to give another $15,000 more. Her savings were disappearing, and the situation kept getting worse no matter how much money she sent. Sunday morning, Eleanor was sitting at her kitchen table, exhausted and terrified, when her phone rang. She looked at the caller ID. It was Michael, her real Michael, calling like he did every Sunday. And for a moment, Eleanor just stared at the phone. Then she answered. Michael? Hey, Grandma, how you doing? His voice was bright, cheerful, completely normal. Eleanor's hands began to shake. Michael, are you okay? They drop the charges? There was a pause on the other end. What charges? Grandma, what are you talking about? Eleanor felt the room spin. The accident, the pedestrian, the lawyer said you were facing manslaughter charges. I've been sending money for bail. They said it was a gag order. I couldn't tell anybody. Grandma, I have no idea what you're talking about. I wasn't in any accident. I'm fine. I've been home all week. Eleanor began to cry. And then she told Michael everything: the phone call on Thursday, the lawyer, the gag order, the $20,500 that she'd already handed over to the couriers, and the $15,000 that she was supposed to give this afternoon. But Michael, it sounded just like you. It sounded exactly like you. Grandma, they have software now that can copy anyone's voice. All they need is one of my videos from Instagram or Facebook. But I can tell you it wasn't me. It was never me. Michael was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Grandma, don't move. Don't answer the door. I'm calling Mom and Dad, and I'm driving down right now. Someone is coming to your house this afternoon, and I'm going to be there when they arrive. Michael, should we call the police first? No, not yet. I want to see this guy's face first. 2 hours later, Eleanor's living room was full. Her daughter, her son-in-law, and Michael, who had broken every speed limit between Hartford and Framingham to get there. He was calm, but Eleanor could see something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Her gentle grandson, the one who taught self-defense to teenagers and seniors, looked like he was ready to use it. The plan was simple. When the courier arrived, Eleanor would answer the door like nothing was wrong. The family would be in the kitchen, out of sight, and she would hand over an envelope with just newspaper inside. And then they'd wait to see what happened. At 2:15, there was a knock at the door. Eleanor's hands were trembling as she opened it, and the young man in a dress shirt stood there, the same polite smile as before. Miss Bancroft, I'm here to collect the payment for your grandson's case. Eleanor handed him the envelope, and the courier opened it and saw that there was newspaper inside, and that's when his face changed instantly. The polite mask disappeared. Something darker took its place. What the hell is this? He looked past Eleanor into the house. Where's the money? I don't know what you're talking about, Eleanor said, her voice shaking. The courier stepped forward, putting his hand on the door, pushing it open wider. I'm not playing games with you, old lady. Where is the money? Eleanor tried to close the door, but he was stronger, and he shoved it open and stepped inside, backing Eleanor into her own hallway. But what he didn't see was Michael coming around the corner from the kitchen. He didn't see the look on Michael's face when he watched a grown man force his way into his grandmother's home. He didn't see any of it until it was way too late. The first punch came from somewhere the courier couldn't track. It caught him square on the jaw and snapped his head sideways. And before he could even process what was happening, a second shot landed in his ribs, and he felt something crack. He doubled over, gasping, and that's when Michael's knee came up and met his face on the way down. The courier hit the floor hard. He tried to get up, but that was a mistake. Michael was on top of him now, controlled, methodical, doing exactly what he taught his students at the gym. Except this wasn't a class. This was a man who had just watched someone shove his 84-year-old grandmother in her own home. Every strike was precise. Every strike was earned. And by the time Michael's mother pulled him off, the courier wasn't fighting back anymore. He was just lying there, curled up, barely breathing, making small sounds. His nose was broken in at least two places. One eye was already swollen shut, and the other one was heading in that direction too. Michael stood up, breathing hard, and looked at his grandmother. "You okay, Grandma?" Eleanor looked at her grandson. Then she looked at the courier bleeding on the hallway floor. And then she looked back at Michael. She had never been more proud of him in her entire life. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Thank you. Thank you so much." Michael's mother was already on the phone with 911. When the police arrived about 12 minutes later, they found the courier sitting on the porch steps, hands zip tied behind his back with cables that Michael found in his grandfather's old toolbox. The man's face looked like it had gone through a meat grinder. The officer looked at Michael, and then at the courier, then back at Michael. What happened to him? Eleanor stepped forward before Michael could say anything. She put on her sweetest grandmother voice. "Oh, officer, it was the strangest thing. This young man tried to force his way into my home, and when my grandson confronted him, he panicked and tripped down the stairs and fell right on his face. Several times, it looked like." The officer stared at her for a long time, analyzing what she just said. Then he looked at the courier, who was definitely not going to contradict that story. The courier knew exactly what would happen if he opened his mouth. He'd find more stairs. "Must have been some set of stairs," the officer said. "Oh, they're very steep," Eleanor replied. The officer just grinned and nodded slowly, pulling out his notepad. "All right, let's start from the beginning." What happened next would take months to fully unravel. The courier, facing serious charges for attempted burglary and fraud, and also nursing a broken nose, 3 cracked ribs, and a face that would take weeks to heal from his fall, began to cooperate almost immediately. It's funny how that works. He decided to give up the phone numbers, addresses, and names. He explained how the whole operation worked: the call centers in the Dominican Republic, professional actors hired to play lawyers and officials, and AI software that could clone anyone's voice from just a few seconds of audio scraped from social media. Michael had videos on his gym's Instagram page, and that's all they needed. The voice Eleanor heard crying on the phone, the voice she would have sworn was her grandson, was a computer. And he told them everything they wanted to know. The courier was very motivated to be helpful at this point. Federal prosecutors in Boston would eventually charge 13 people in connection with the operation. 9 were arrested. The call centers were photographed and documented. Whiteboards showing how much money each caller had extracted from victims was seized as evidence. And in total, the operation had targeted over 400 grandparents across 5 different states, stealing more than $5 million. The average age of each of the victims was 85. And in many cases, they called the same victim multiple times, inventing new emergencies to extract more and more money. Eleanor had lost $20,500, and it was painful. It was humiliating for her, but it could have been much worse. And because she told her family, and because Michael called at exactly the right moment, and because that courier made the mistake of forcing his way into an 84-year-old woman's home while her MMA instructor grandson was standing in the kitchen, well, now hundreds of other grandparents would never get that first phone call. Now, here's what Eleanor almost didn't learn in time, but now you know. First, and this is critical, there is no such thing as a gag order that prevents you from verifying an emergency with your own family. This is a lie scammers use to isolate you. No judge, lawyer, or court in America will ever tell you that you can't call your own grandson to make sure he's okay. And if anyone tells you that talking to family members is illegal, that's the scam revealing itself. Just hang up immediately. Second, and this is terrifying, AI can now clone anyone's voice from a few seconds of audio. That video your grandson posted on Instagram, that voicemail your granddaughter left you last Christmas, that's all scammers need to create a perfect copy of their voice. The voice Eleanor heard crying on the phone wasn't a bad impersonation. It was a computer that sounded exactly like Michael. Your ears cannot be trusted anymore. The verification has to come from calling them back directly. Third, if someone calls claiming to be a family member in distress, hang up and call that family member directly at a number you already have. Don't use any number the caller gives you. Don't worry about being rude. A real grandchild will understand. A scammer will disappear. Fourth, no legitimate legal system requires bail to be paid in cash and picked up by a courier at your home. That's not how bail works. Real bail is posted at a courthouse or through a licensed bail bondsman. So if anyone ever tells you otherwise, then you know also it's a scam. And finally, if this happens to you or someone you love, tell somebody immediately. Call your family, call the police. Eleanor's story could have ended with her losing everything. Instead, it ended with a courier on her hallway floor learning a very, very painful lesson. The gag order was fake. The lawyer was fake. The emergency was fake. But the courage Eleanor showed when she finally told her family, that was real. And those stares, well, they were very, very real for that courier. So share this with your parents, share it with your grandparents, your friends, your family. Tell them if anyone ever says you legally can't verify an emergency with your own family, that's not the law. It's a scam. And if you catch it on time, you might just help take down the entire operation. Now, this story is a fictionalized story of an actual real situation that did, in fact, happen. We changed the names, we changed some of the details to protect the people that were involved, but this is a real scam that's happening right now. Fortunately, this scam was taken down, but there are many more like that. And that's why we share these stories on this channel. So if this helped and you learned something, please feel free to subscribe as well as share this with anybody that you know. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.